cops destroy Black Man's home, then learn he's a Navy SEAL commander in the small, tight-knit neighborhood of Maplewood, where people greet each other on front porches and share holiday barbecues. An unthinkable event is about to tear this peaceful suburb apart. It begins one simmering summer afternoon when police officers arrive on the quiet street, believing they're about to bust open a suspected criminal's hideout. But what they don't realize is that the house they target belongs to Marcus Carter, a reserved man with a hidden history of extraordinary heroism. The lines between prejudice, power, and truth will soon blur. And as the officers discover who Marcus really is, fate will deal its harshest lesson. Maplewood was a place where summer block parties were once the talk of the town, where fruit stands offered juicy peaches and sweet lemonade, and kids rode their bikes in the safety of cul-de-sacs. Yet behind the pristine lawns and manicured hedges, an undercurrent of distrust had begun to brew. The tension wasn't always outwardly visible, but when you lived in Maplewood long enough, you could sense it, like a low hum vibrating beneath the neighborhood's friendly veneer. Marcus Carter, a tall, muscular black man, moved into his modest single-story home 3 years prior. He'd chosen Maplewood for its peaceful reputation, looking forward to leading a quiet, civilian life after decades of service. He rarely spoke of his past. Most of his neighbors assumed he was a former Marine, or maybe just an enthusiast who enjoyed daily 5 a.m. runs. Few knew the reason behind his stoic composure and disciplined routine. Marcus was a Navy SEAL commander who had served under the Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. He had also been part of several high-profile missions overseas, coordinating efforts to extract hostages and neutralize dangerous threats. But in Maplewood, he didn't advertise these accolades. He wanted a simpler life. Over time, hushed conversations about Marcus circulated among the neighbors. Some believed he was too secretive. Others, impressed by his polite demeanor, waved happily whenever he jogged by. But a few, influenced by prejudice and baseless gossip, whispered that he must be into something illegal. Perhaps it was his imposing physique, or maybe their own biases. Regardless, these neighbors watched him with suspicion. Whenever Maplewood's local police cruised by, nobody batted an eye. It felt as natural as the cicadas humming on a summer evening. But in the preceding weeks, rumors about a spike in burglaries had run rampant. Residents insisted that suspicious vehicles roamed the streets at night, and the local police began to take notice. They were on high alert, combing through every unusual report, determined to restore a sense of safety to the area. This was the backdrop on that fateful afternoon, when Sergeant Daniel Harlow received a frantic tip. A panicked voice claimed that a man fitting the description of a suspect with a record in gun running was hiding out on Maplewood Drive. The anonymous caller gave details: tall, muscular, black, lived alone, suspicious comings and goings, details that pointed the police to one house, Marcus Carter's. Heat shimmered off the asphalt as Sergeant Harlow and his team screeched to a halt in front of Marcus's home. The call had alleged the occupant was armed, dangerous, and deeply involved in a string of high-grade arms thefts. The accusation seemed borderline absurd, but Harlow was under pressure from his superiors. The community had been breathing down the department's neck, claiming not enough was being done to quell the rumored crime wave. The moment the police arrived, some neighbors peered from behind curtains. Others, especially those already wary of Marcus, stood on their lawns, arms folded, nodding as if to say, "I told you he was trouble." A swirl of tension infused the humid air. Marcus, wearing a faded navy t-shirt and athletic shorts, was inside, washing dishes after an early lunch. He heard the screech of tires, the static of police radios, and the echo of a commanding voice shouting, "Come out with your hands up." His pulse quickened. Why on earth were they here? Had something happened to a neighbor? He set the plate in the drying rack and stepped toward the front door. Through the window he could see the police, weapons drawn, creeping onto his lawn. Though he had faced far more frightening situations in war zones, confusion and anger welled inside him. This was his home, a refuge he'd built. Yet all the training in the world couldn't prepare him for this heartbreak, watching uniformed officers aim rifles at his safe haven. One officer shouted, "We know you're in there, Carter. Show yourself." Slowly, the last name came out with a sneer. Marcus felt each syllable like a slap. They didn't address him with respect or concern, just immediate suspicion, a sign they might have pegged him as a criminal. He lifted his hands to chest level and slowly opened the door. Before he could utter a word, a flash-bang grenade landed near his feet. The explosion of light and sound rocked his senses. Startled, he stumbled backward. He called out, "Stop! I'm not armed. I'm not resisting." But the police were already inside, smashing through the doorframe. Furniture toppled, and the glass coffee table in the living room shattered as the officers poured in. Marcus slammed to the floor, pinned under a knee. He had faced enemies in foreign lands, launched covert raids in hostile territories, but never had he been handled with such immediate aggression in his own country, his own living room. Adrenaline flared, yet he forced himself to remain still to avoid further escalation. One officer rummaged through cabinets and closets, tossing clothes, personal items, and keepsakes aside. Another kicked open the door to the guest room, swiftly clearing it. Sergeant Harlow loomed over Marcus, spitting out commands. The moment Harlow recognized that no immediate threat was present, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. But protocols demanded thoroughness. They searched every corner, knocking over lamps and leaving footprints on the couch. But there were no stolen goods or illegal weapons to be found. The only sign of firearms was a locked, standard-issue pistol in a safe perfectly legal for a retired serviceman. The rest of the house told the story of a man who lived simply, carefully arranged books on leadership and tactical strategy. A few framed photos of him with other SEALs in desert fatigues, and dusty medals of valor hidden away in a drawer. As the raid dragged on, neighbors watched in shock. Some, who had always liked Marcus, stood helpless, tears forming in their eyes. Others, who had nurtured suspicion, felt their confidence waver when no contraband appeared. After nearly half an hour, the officers realized they had nothing to pin on him. Sergeant Harlow asked a team member, "Are you sure this is the right house?" But the tip came from a trusted anonymous line. Protocol said it was legit. Feeling the weight of a potentially grave mistake, Harlow gestured for the others to stand down. Marcus's living room was completely wrecked. Shards of glass littered the floor. The walls bore marks from the battering ram, and upturned furniture created a scene of utter chaos. The injustice was almost too much to bear. Marcus's eyes burned with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Yet, with iron discipline etched into his soul, he swallowed his rage. Sergeant Harlow glowered at Marcus, as if trying to justify the wreckage. "We had intel that someone here was hoarding weapons. We have to check every lead," he mumbled. Marcus kept his hands raised slightly, his voice measured but firm. "I'm not a criminal. My name is Marcus Carter, the first served as a Navy SEAL commander for over 20 years. He glanced at the black duffel bag the officers had ripped open, filled with gear from his last deployment. "I have records to prove it." Skepticism etched itself into Harlow's face. Another officer picked up a framed photograph that had fallen onto the floor. In it, Marcus was in combat gear, standing beside a known figure in the Navy Special Warfare community, Rear Admiral Colin Green, a well-respected figure at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado. The officer's eyes widened. He placed the photograph on a nearby table and quietly said, "Sarge, this looks legit." A hush fell over the team. Marcus picked himself off the floor, standing tall, arms folded across his chest. He was done being meek. Harlow stepped forward, contrition slowly replacing hostility. "If you truly are who you say you are, then we might have made a mistake," he said, though the words came out painfully. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Word spread rapidly throughout Maplewood. By early evening, a local news station van parked across the street, cameras rolling as neighbors gathered. People started to learn the truth. The house they had deemed suspicious belonged to a decorated Navy SEAL commander who had risked his life for the country. Outrage swelled among supporters of Marcus, and even some who had once harbored doubts felt remorse. They recognized that some form of prejudice and faulty assumptions had guided the police that day. Marcus refused interviews at first. He paced across what remained of his living room, phone in hand, calling a close friend from his SEAL days, a fellow commander named Anthony Graves. Tony was outraged. He had heard of wrongful raids, but never imagined it happening to Marcus. "You're one of the best men I've ever served with," Tony said, voice trembling with anger. "If they think we'll just roll over, they have another thing coming. Let me mobilize some contacts." Word reached individuals within the Navy community. Soon, retired officers and a few active duty ones who had served under Marcus were speaking out in disbelief. Local Maplewood authorities found themselves in an unwelcome spotlight. The story had legs, and it was walking its way through social media at lightning speed, overshadowing the department's attempts to justify the operation. The Maplewood Police Department scrambled to respond. They insisted they had to act on the tip, but scrutiny of that anonymous tipster increased. Who had made that call? Why was it so detailed in describing Marcus, but entirely off the mark about criminal activity? The top brass at the precinct launched an internal investigation. Meanwhile, the daily phone calls to the station turned accusatory. But karma doesn't always arrive with a single dramatic flourish. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, a series of small events that lead to a reckoning. Sergeant Harlow's superiors began to question his leadership. They found inconsistencies in his handling of previous cases involving people of color, raising old allegations that had never been thoroughly examined. Harlow's once respected name now circulated in city council meetings and discussions with the mayor. A pressure cooker of accountability was about to explode. Meanwhile, Marcus surveyed his home, now a shell of its former comfort. Shattered glass was replaced by plywood on the windows. Broken furniture was piled in the corner. Most heartbreakingly, a few of his service medals had been bent, and a photo album filled with memories of his deployments was water-damaged from a burst pipe the officers had dislodged. He stared at the wreckage, feeling a hollow ache in his chest. This was more than property damage. This was a violation of the sanctuary he had cultivated. On the third day after the raid, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up outside Marcus's home. Out stepped Captain Rebecca Langley from Naval Special Warfare Command's Community Support Division, accompanied by two other high-ranking officials. They had known Marcus's reputation for thoroughness, discipline, and valor. He had led missions in regions so dangerous most men would have quailed at the thought. And here he was, forced into a fight he never sought. Langley entered the battered living room, greeting Marcus with a salute. He returned it out of instinct, though he was no longer in active service. She spoke softly, as if at a funeral. "Commander Carter, I am so sorry to see this," she said, gesturing to the disarray. "We've alerted those in the chain of command who can offer assistance. We intend to help you restore your home." Marcus listened politely, touched by the gesture. But he was also aware that this raid had uncovered deep-rooted biases that no mere apology or check could fix. "I appreciate your help," he said, "but I don't just want my house repaired. I need accountability for what happened here." Langley nodded solemnly. "We'll provide legal counsel. Use every resource we have. You're not alone in this." Her words resonated, a reminder that though Maplewood had shown him its worst side, there were allies who wouldn't stand for the injustice. As the days passed, the Maplewood Police Department found itself inundated with Freedom of Information Act FOIA requests. Journalists demanded body camera footage from the raid. Advocacy groups requested evidence regarding the anonymous tip. This onslaught forced the department to release partial documents. But what emerged painted a disturbing picture. The tip had come from a pay-as-you-go phone with no direct ties to Marcus. The official records revealed that the suspect described had a different height, age, and even a distinct facial tattoo that Marcus never had. Sergeant Harlow's increasingly frantic attempts to justify his actions were contradicted by the official dispatch logs. Multiple lines had been redacted, but it was clear the police never had firm evidence on Marcus. They had leaped headfirst into destruction on flimsy hearsay. Meanwhile, an eyewitness came forward, an elderly woman who lived across the street. She claimed she saw a neighbor, Frank Hansen, making a call outside his house mere minutes before the police sirens echoed down their street. Frank was known for muttering racial slurs under his breath. He had made snide remarks about Marcus's military stance, questioning whether he was a gang enforcer. The rumor mill churned, and soon Frank became the prime suspect in engineering the bogus tip. Frank Hansen was a man whose bitterness had festered over decades. A disgruntled former employee at a local manufacturing plant, he felt sidelined by life. Seeing a successful black neighbor was enough to stoke the flames of envy and prejudice. On the surface, Frank would wave politely in front of others, but beneath that veneer, hatred simmered. A group of neighbors cornered Frank one afternoon, demanding answers. He cursed at them, refusing to admit anything. But the seeds of evidence mounted. Cell tower data placed Frank's phone near the pay-as-you-go kiosk that sold the device used for the tip. Surveillance footage from a local store seemed to show a man of Frank's build purchasing that phone. Though the image was grainy, the shape of the face and slight limp he walked with were distinguishing features. The pressure to confess was mounting. Marcus, still reeling from the destruction of his sanctuary, was none the less determined to remain collected. If there was one lesson his time in the SEALs had taught him, it was that clarity and strategy win battles. He assembled a team of legal advisors, some provided by the Navy, others by local civil rights organizations. Their goal was to ensure that not only the direct perpetrators, but also the system that allowed this to happen, would face the consequences. A local community center offered its hall for a town meeting. Emotions ran high as citizens demanded the Maplewood Police Department provide a public explanation. Marcus's supporters, along with civil rights advocates, arrived in force, brandishing signs that read, "Justice for Marcus and stop racial profiling." Sergeant Harlow, flanked by the chief of police and a few other officers, took the stage. The hush in the room was deafening. The chief spoke, voice trembling slightly. "Our department strives to protect and serve all members of this community. In this case, we may have acted on inaccurate information and used disproportionate force." The word may struck a nerve, causing a ripple of angry murmurs. Everyone knew this wasn't a may, it was a definite. Marcus stepped forward, calm yet resolute. "I've dedicated my life to protecting American lives, regardless of race, color, or creed. I never imagined I would be attacked in my own home by the people sworn to protect me on the basis of a false tip." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I stand here today not just for myself, but for every person who has been or could be wrongfully targeted due to biases. My trust has been broken, but that doesn't mean our community can't change. Let's use this moment to demand accountability so no one else has to experience this nightmare." Shortly after the town meeting, Frank Hansen's meltdown arrived. Pressed by legal threats, public derision, and a sense of cornered desperation, he admitted to making the tip. With every word, he revealed the resentment he'd harbored. That man, Carter, he walks around like he owns the place. He's a big shot, Frank ranted in a confession recorded by the police. I just wanted him gone. He had everyone fooled. Frank's confession was the final piece of the puzzle. The Maplewood Police Department officially issued a public apology, promising reforms. But the question remained, would the apology alone address the magnitude of the wrong done? Marcus thought of the destruction, the potential for lethal harm had he reacted differently. He wasn't in a forgiving mood. Marcus's legal team filed a lawsuit for damages against the police department and the individuals involved in the raid, citing civil rights violations, unlawful entry, and property damage. Expert witnesses, including security consultants and retired military officers, testified on Marcus's behalf. They underscored that no standard protocol would have justified the force used that day, given the shaky evidence the police had. In the weeks leading up to trial, the Maplewood City Council, fearing a massive public relations disaster and financial liability, pushed for a settlement. Negotiations were tense. Marcus insisted on two conditions: a substantial financial settlement and the implementation of comprehensive anti-bias training within the police department. He also demanded a civilian oversight board to handle future complaints. These demands weren't just about him. They were about ensuring that future Maplewood residents, no matter their background, would be treated with fairness. Eventually, the city council caved. The settlement was one of the largest in Maplewood history. While money couldn't rebuild trust or heal emotional scars, it provided Marcus the resources to restore his home and to help fund community outreach programs. The police department, forced to undergo training and external oversight, found itself under intense scrutiny, a karmic backlash that some officers viewed as humiliating, yet necessary. With settlement funds in hand, Marcus vowed to transform his wrecked house into something more than it once was. Construction crews arrived to tear out damaged walls, replace battered door frames, and install new windows. He hired local builders, many of whom volunteered long hours out of admiration for Marcus. They recognized him as a man who had bled for his country and then endured a travesty at home. As the restoration project neared completion, Tony, Marcus's SEAL brother, dropped by with a truckload of new furniture. "Got these donated from a few folks at the base," he said, beaming with pride. "We can't let you do this alone." They hauled in a sturdy oak dining table, plush couches, and even a new coffee table with a bulletproof glass top, an ironic nod to what had been shattered before. Little by little, color and warmth returned to the house. Painted walls, adorned with patriotic artwork and personal mementos, replaced the memories of broken glass. A new sense of possibility blossomed within Marcus, reminding him that in times of great strife, the human spirit can rebuild stronger than before. Throughout his life, Marcus Carter had always charged forward, from the moment he enlisted in the Navy to his promotion to commander. Now, after winning this hard-fought battle at home, he channeled his energy into advocacy. With part of his settlement, he founded a non-profit organization called Defend and Respect, dedicated to bridging the gap between law enforcement and communities of color. He organized town halls, workshops, and mentorship programs that included both residents and off-duty officers. His story became a catalyst for systemic reflection. Marcus was invited to speak at the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, addressing new recruits about the importance of fighting injustice wherever it emerges. He reminded them that defending American values doesn't stop when you leave the battlefield. It continues at home in everyday acts that shape society. Though Maplewood remained a mostly quiet suburb, the lessons learned from Marcus's experience rippled through the region. Other police departments began examining their own policies, hoping to prevent a similar fiasco. Real change, though slow, was on the horizon. With Frank's confession and mounting evidence of past misconduct, Sergeant Harlow faced an internal review. It emerged that he had escalated situations with minority suspects multiple times, though the complaints never made it far up the chain of command. Now, with Maplewood under intense public scrutiny, the department could no longer protect him. Harlow was forced to resign. No ceremonious farewell or pension plaque, just a letter stating the reasons for his departure. The local news ran the story, summarizing the chain of events that led to his downfall, the fatal combination of prejudice and an unchecked sense of authority. Karma had arrived, unveiling hidden truths and exacting its price. Harlow retreated from public life, moving out of Maplewood in search of a new start. But the stain on his record remained, an indelible mark of a moment when he chose hostility over fairness. Frank's confession opened him up to a world of legal troubles. Though he faced misdemeanor charges for making a false police report, he also became a social pariah in Maplewood. He lost his job at a small shop in town after the store owner decided they wanted no association with such toxic behavior. The neighbors he used to gossip with turned away from him. Left alone and bitter, Frank wandered the streets of Maplewood, haunted by how his single malicious act had changed not just Marcus's life, but his own as well. He had allowed prejudice to guide him, and the result was a boomerang of consequences. Over the next months, Maplewood gradually returned to its tranquil rhythms, but it was forever altered. Neighborhood watch groups became more inclusive, focusing on actual facts rather than idle rumors. The newly formed Civilian Oversight Board of the police department had real authority, ensuring that complaints about misconduct were handled transparently. Marcus, though weighed down by painful memories, found solace in the changes he had helped usher in. People who once viewed him with suspicion now regarded him with gratitude. Some neighbors who had hesitated to speak to him now stopped by with homemade pies, a gesture of reconciliation. Maplewood wasn't perfect, but it was trying. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus sat on his freshly rebuilt porch. He gazed at the newly planted flowers lining the walkway, inhaling the scent of dew on fresh soil. He thought of the missions he had led, the men he had lost, and the life he'd tried to build after retirement. His mind drifted to a conversation he once had with Admiral William H. McRaven, an icon in Navy SEAL lore. McRaven had told him, "Great leaders know how to handle the quiet battles at home just as well as the loud battles abroad." Marcus smiled wryly. He never expected to fight a battle here in Maplewood. But in the end, he had exemplified the qualities he'd honed over decades: discipline, courage, and unyielding commitment to justice. Marcus Carter didn't ask for a spotlight. He didn't move to Maplewood to be a symbol of racial injustice or systemic failure. Yet fate thrust him into that role. By standing firm and demanding accountability, he transformed a personal tragedy into a catalyst for positive change. He became a local hero, but more importantly, he was a man who reclaimed his dignity and demanded that others be treated with the same respect. His home, once decimated by prejudice and ignorance, now stood renewed. Every wooden beam, every gleaming window pane, and every new piece of furniture told a story of resilience. Neighbors often saw him on his porch, sipping coffee or reading. They waved, and he waved back. The lines that once divided Maplewood had started to fade, replaced by a sense of solidarity born of adversity. Marcus still harbored scars, both visible and invisible. But in each quiet moment, he found resolve in the knowledge that he never wavered from his principles. Even after the most harrowing experiences, he continued to uphold the values he had fought for: freedom, fairness, and unity. If ever Maplewood needed reminding of what true service and sacrifice looked like, they had only to look at Marcus Carter, the Navy SEAL commander who turned a moment of injustice into an enduring lesson. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey of a man whose quiet strength triumphed over destructive prejudice. Marcus Carter's resolve reminds us that real heroes can be hidden in our very midst, people who protect our country on distant shores and then return home, only to face unexpected battles of a different kind. His story is more than just a lesson in accountability. It's a call to action for every community to examine its biases and stand up for what's right. If you found value in this story, if it moved you, opened your eyes, or ignited your passion for fairness, please remember to give this video a thumbs up. Share it with friends and family so they too can learn from Marcus's unwavering courage. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking stories that shine a light on the power of resilience and unity.